However, when my son walked into the courtroom, everyone present was dumbfounded. The courtroom doors creaked open, and the murmur of anger and accusation that had filled the air died instantly. Every head turned, every eye fixed on the figure stepping through the doorway. My son, Buddy. The silence was so thick. You could hear the ticking of the judge's clock, the soft gasp of the jury, the sharp intake of breath from Brenda and Tiffany. For a long, torturous moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Everyone just stared, their faces drained of color, their mouths hanging open in stunned disbelief. Brenda was the first to break. She stumbled back from her seat, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes bulging as if she'd seen a ghost.
No, no.
That's not possible, she whispered, her voice trembling so hard the words barely made it out. That's not him. That can't be Buddy. Tiffany, who'd been sobbing dramatically just seconds before, went completely still, her tears dried midstream, her body rigid, her gaze locked on my son. The look of terror and despair on her face vanished, replaced by raw, unadulterated shock. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She just stared, wide-eyed, as if the ground had opened up beneath her. The jury members leaned forward, their expressions a mix of confusion and horror. The public spectators, who'd been yelling for Buddy's death just minutes earlier, fell silent, their insults dying on their lips. Even the judge, who'd maintained a stoic composure throughout the trial, blinked hard, his eyebrows shooting up in surprise as he looked at Buddy. I stood tall, my back straight, a cold, quiet satisfaction settling in my chest. This was why I'd refused to back down, why I'd endured their insults, their accusations, their attempts to destroy my son. This was the truth they'd tried so hard to ignore, the truth that would shatter their lives into a million pieces. Buddy walked slowly down the aisle, his small hand in mine. He was 7 years old, not the tall, strong pervert Tiffany had described. He had soft, curly brown hair, big blue eyes, and a faint scar on his forehead from a bike accident the year before. He was wearing his favorite red hoodie, the one with a dinosaur on the front, and his scuffed sneakers. He looked up at me, his face confused by the silence. But by the way everyone was staring at him. "Mommy," he whispered, squeezing my hand tighter. "Why is everyone looking at me?" My throat tightened, but I smiled down at him, squeezing his hand back. "It's okay, baby. Just tell the judge the truth, okay?" He nodded, his eyes still wide as he looked around the courtroom. When his gaze fell on Brenda and Tiffany, he tilted his head as if trying to place them. "Mommy, who are those ladies?" he asked, his voice innocent and unafraid. Brenda let out a shrill scream, her composure completely unraveling. "Liar. You're a liar, Cassandra. That's not your son. You're trying to trick us. You brought some random kid here to pretend to be Buddy." She lunged forward as if she wanted to grab Buddy, but the bailiff stepped in, blocking her path.
"Mom,
"Please remain seated," he barked, his hand on his belt. Brenda struggled against him, her face red with anger and panic. "That's not Buddy. My daughter said Buddy was a teenager. A big, strong teenager. That kid is just a baby. You're lying. You're all lying." Tiffany, still frozen in shock, finally found her voice. She stood up, her legs shaking, and pointed at Buddy, her voice cracking.
No.
"No, that's not him. The boy who attacked me was tall. He had a deep voice. He wasn't a little kid." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Jury members whispered frantically to each other, the public spectators murmuring in confusion, some of them looking at Brenda and Tiffany with suspicion. Now the judge slammed his gavel down, his voice booming, "Order. Order in the court." The chaos died down, but the tension remained thick. The judge turned to me, his expression serious. "Miss Cassandra, is this your son, Buddy?" I nodded, holding up Buddy's hand. "Yes, Your Honor, this is my son, Buddy. He just turned 7 last month. He has never assaulted anyone, especially not a grown woman. He couldn't have. He's just a child." I pulled out a birth certificate from my purse, handing it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "This is his birth certificate, Your Honor. And here are medical records, showing he was home with me the night of the alleged assault. He had a fever and was in bed by 8:30 p.m. The neighbor next door can testify to that. She brought him soup that night." The judge examined the documents, his eyebrows furrowed. He then turned to Brenda and Tiffany, his voice cold. "Miss Brenda, Miss Tiffany, you both testified that Buddy was a teenager, that he was tall and strong, that he dragged Miss Tiffany to the rooftop and assaulted her. How do you explain this?" Brenda's face paled, her lips trembling. She looked at Tiffany, then back at the judge, her voice stammering. I don't know. He told me. Tiffany told me he was a teenager. I just believed her. I thought she was telling the truth. Tiffany burst into tears. But this time they weren't the dramatic fake tears she'd shed earlier. These were tears of fear and panic. I made a mistake. I was scared. The man who attacked me was wearing a hoodie, and I couldn't see his face clearly. I thought it was the new neighbor's son. Brenda told me his name was Buddy, and I just assumed he was a teenager. You're lying, I snapped, my voice cutting through her sobs. You said you saw his face. You said you rode the elevator with him. You said he told you his name was Buddy. Now you're saying you couldn't see his face. You're making this up as you go. Tiffany flinched, her body shaking. I was confused. I was traumatized. I didn't know what to say. Brenda pressured me. She told me if I didn't say it was Buddy, we wouldn't get the money. She said we could sue you and get rich. Brenda's eyes widened and she turned on Tiffany, screaming, "You little liar. I never said that. You're the one who wanted the money. You're the one who made up the story." The mother and daughter began yelling at each other, their lies unraveling right in front of the court. The jury members looked at each other in disgust, public spectators booing and hissing. The judge slammed his gavel down again, his voice furious. "Silence. Both of you. Be quiet." He turned to Tiffany's lawyer, who looked pale and flustered. "Miss Attorney, what do you have to say about this? Your client's testimony has been completely discredited. And the so-called DNA report," he held up the document, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "is clearly a forgery, given that the defendant's son is a 7-year-old child." The lawyer stumbled over her words, her face red. "Your Honor, I had no idea. I was given this report by Miss Brenda, and I believed it was genuine. I had no reason to suspect it was fake." "You had no reason to suspect?" I asked, stepping forward. "You didn't bother to verify the report. You didn't bother to ask for proof of my son's age. You just took their word for it and accused a child of assault. That's negligence at best and misconduct at worst." The judge nodded, his expression stern. "I agree, Ms. Cassandra. This case is a travesty. Ms. Brenda and Ms. Tiffany have clearly fabricated a story, falsified evidence, and falsely accused a minor of a heinous crime. I am dismissing all charges against your son, Buddy." Immediately a wave of relief washed over me. But I didn't let my guard down. I knew this wasn't over. Brenda and Tiffany had gone to great lengths to frame my son. They'd faked bruises, forged a DNA report under oath. There had to be more to this than just wanting money. There had to be a reason they targeted my son specifically. Brenda collapsed into her seat, sobbing as the judge continued. "Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation into Miss Brenda and Miss Tiffany for perjury, falsification of evidence, and false accusation. They will be held accountable for their actions." Tiffany's lawyer stood up, her voice trembling. "Your Honor, I request a recess to consult with my client. Given the new information, I think we need to reevaluate our case." The judge rolled his eyes. "There is no case to reevaluate. Miss Attorney, this case is dismissed. Now remove these two from my courtroom before I hold them in contempt." Bailiff stepped forward, grabbing Brenda and Tiffany by the arms. Brenda struggled, screaming insults at me as they dragged her away. "You'll regret this, Cassandra. I won't let you get away with this. I'll find a way to ruin you and that little brat." Tiffany just cried, her head hanging in shame, as she was led out of the courtroom. The public spectators cheered, clapping and yelling apologies to me and Buddy. The jury members nodded at me, their expressions filled with regret. Judge looked at me, his expression softening. "Miss Cassandra, I am so sorry for what you and your son have been through. No child should have to go through this, and no mother should have to defend her child against such baseless accusations. I hope you can find peace after this." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I knelt down, pulling Buddy into my arms. "Are you okay, baby?" He nodded, burying his face in my neck.
"I'm okay, Mommy."
"But why did that lady yell at me?" I hugged him tighter, kissing the top of his head. "Because she was lying, baby. She made up a story about you. But everyone knows the truth now. You're safe." We walked out of the courtroom, and the public spectators stepped aside, smiling and apologizing. "I'm so sorry for judging you," one woman said. "I should have waited for the truth. Your son is so brave." Another man said, "You are a great mother for defending him." I thanked them, but I didn't stop. I just wanted to get my son out of that building. The heavy glass doors of the courthouse pushed open, and the humid afternoon air hit me like a physical blow. The media, who had spent the last 3 weeks painting me as the delusional mother of a teenage predator, were suddenly silent as I walked down the concrete steps. A few cameras flashed, but the aggressive shouts for comments were gone. They had seen the 7-year-old boy holding my hand. They knew they had backed the wrong horse. I didn't look at them. I kept my grip firm on Buddy's hand, guiding him to our battered Honda Civic in the parking garage. Only when the doors were locked and the engine was running did I finally let out the breath I felt I'd been holding for a month. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I squeezed the leather until my knuckles turned white, forcing the adrenaline out of my system. "Mommy?" Buddy's voice came from the back seat. I looked in the rearview mirror. He was swinging his legs, his dinosaur hoodie slightly crumpled. "Are we going to get ice cream now? You said if I was good at the boring place, we could get ice cream." A dry, cracked laugh escaped my throat. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away furiously. "Yeah, baby. We're going to get ice cream. 2 scoops. Whatever flavor you want." I pulled out of the garage, but my mind was spinning faster than the tires. The judge had dismissed the case. Brenda and Tiffany were going to be investigated. To the rest of the world, it was over. A clerical error, a malicious lie, a bizarre misunderstanding. But I knew Brenda. She was greedy, vicious, and a compulsive liar, but she wasn't a mastermind. Faking a DNA report? Bribing a private lab? Navigating the criminal justice system to expedite a trial? That took money. A lot of money. Brenda lived in a rent-controlled apartment and drove a car with a rusted bumper. She didn't have the resources to pull off an elaborate frame-up on her own. Someone had backed her. Someone who wanted me dragged through the mud, convicted of negligence, and stripped of my custody rights. And I knew exactly who had that kind of money and that kind of motive. Richard. My late husband's brother. David had died 3 years ago in a car accident. He had been a partner at a massive real estate development firm, a company he built from the ground up alongside his older brother, Richard. But David never trusted Richard's business ethics. When David died, his will revealed a bombshell. His entire 50% stake in the company didn't go to Richard. It went into an ironclad trust for Buddy, with me as the sole executor and guardian. Richard had been furious. He had sued me, harassed me, and tried to claim I was mentally unfit to manage the assets. He had lost every court battle. The only way Richard could gain control of the company was if I was sent to prison, and Buddy became a ward of the state, leaving Richard as the closest living blood relative to claim guardianship. The realization hit me so hard, I nearly ran a red light. I didn't take Buddy straight home. Instead, I drove to the one person I thought might listen. Detective Mike Vance looked like a man who survived entirely on black coffee and spite. He was the one who had initially taken the police report from Tiffany. He had been required to arrest me for obstruction when I refused to produce my teenage son, but I remembered the look in his eyes that night. He hadn't liked it. He thought the paperwork looked too clean, the DNA results too fast. I walked into the precinct, leaving Buddy in the lobby with a sympathetic desk sergeant and a coloring book. Vance was at his desk, typing aggressively with 2 fingers. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Case was dismissed an hour ago, Mrs. Hayes," Vance said, leaning back in his chair. "You should be home celebrating." "I'm not here for a celebration," I said, pulling up a chair uninvited. I leaned over his desk, keeping my voice low. "I'm here to report a conspiracy. Brenda and Tiffany didn't act alone." Vance sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Look, I get it. You're angry. You have every right to be. The DA is already drafting perjury charges. They'll do time." "They faked a lab-certified DNA report, Detective," I interrupted, my voice hard. "They hired a shark of a lawyer who usually charges $500 an hour. Where did they get the money?" "Brenda works at a laundromat." Vance stopped rubbing his nose. His eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone paid them. Someone who wanted me to lose custody of my son." I placed a piece of paper on his desk. It was a copy of the company charter David had left me. "Richard Hayes, my brother-in-law. Look into Brenda's bank accounts. Look for offshore wires, cash deposits, burner phones. Please, Detective. If Richard is behind this, he's not going to stop just because Plan A failed. He's going to come for us again." Vance looked at the paper, then up at me. He didn't promise anything, but he didn't hand the paper back, either. "Go home, Mrs. Hayes. Lock your doors. I'll make a few calls." The first 3 days passed in agonizing silence. I kept Buddy home from school. I didn't answer my phone. I jumped at every creak of the floorboards in our apartment. I kept David's old baseball bat right next to the front door. On the 4th night, it rained. A heavy, relentless downpour that masked the sounds of the city. I had just put Buddy to bed and was sitting in the kitchen, staring at a lukewarm cup of tea, when my cell phone vibrated. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello. Cassandra." The voice was raspy, panicked, and barely a whisper. "Cassandra, you have to help me." I went rigid. I would recognize that voice anywhere. "Brenda." "He's going to kill me," she sobbed. The sound of rain on her end of the line was deafening. "She was outside. He said I botched it. He said I left a trail. I didn't know what else to do. I'm hiding in the alley behind the old meatpacking plant on 4th. "Who is going to kill you, Brenda?" I asked, my blood turning to ice. I grabbed a pen and wrote down the address. The guy who paid me, Richard, your brother-in-law. He gave me 50 grand to say your kid was the one who attacked Tiffany. He got the DNA report, he got the lawyer, he did all of it. Now the cops are freezing my accounts, and he sent someone to my apartment. I barely got out. Call the police, I said coldly. Why are you calling me? Because the cops won't get here in time. And if they do, they'll just lock me up. You have to come get me. I'll testify against him. Cassandra, I'll wear a wire, I'll give you his emails, everything. Just get me out of here before his guy finds me. My grip on the phone tightened. Every maternal instinct I had screamed at me to hang up, lock the deadbolt, and stay with my son. Let the woman who tried to destroy my life drown in the mess she made. But if Richard killed her, the trail died with her. He would get away with it, and he would come for me next. I'm calling Detective Vance, I said. I'll give him your location.
No.
Please. Brenda shrieked. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. I dialed Vance's number immediately. He answered on the second ring. I relayed everything Brenda had just told me. Don't move, Vance ordered, his voice sharp. Do not leave your apartment, Cassandra. I'm dispatching a unit to that alley right now. I'm coming to your place. I hung up. I checked the locks on the front door. I checked the windows. I walked into Buddy's room. He was fast asleep, his chest rising and falling softly under his dinosaur blanket. I sat in the chair by his bed, the baseball bat resting across my knees, waiting. An hour passed. The rain outside turned into a violent thunderstorm. Then, my phone buzzed again. It was Vance. Cassandra, he said, his voice heavy. We found her. Is she?
She's dead. Hit and run.
Found her at the mouth of the alley. Looks like she stepped out to flag someone down, and a black SUV plowed right through her. No plates, no cameras in the alley. A cold wave of nausea washed over me. Tiffany. We sent a squad car to Tiffany's location. She's safe, but she's catatonic. She doesn't know anything about the money. Brenda kept her in the dark. Vance paused. Listen to me carefully. I pulled Brenda's phone records. The last person she called before you wasn't Richard Hayes. It was a burner phone. It pinged off a cell tower less than a mile from your apartment. My breath hitched. What does that mean? It means the hit-and-run driver was already in your neighborhood when she called him. He wasn't tracking her. He was tracking you. A loud, metallic clunk echoed from the front of my apartment. The sound of the deadbolt being bypassed. Vance, I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. Someone is in my house. I'm 3 minutes away. Barricade the bedroom door. Do not engage. You hear me? Cassandra. I dropped the phone. I didn't have time to answer. I grabbed the heavy oak dresser next to Buddy's bed and shoved it, ignoring the tearing pain in my shoulders as the wood scraped against the hardwood floor. I wedged it under the brass doorknob of the bedroom door just as I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway outside. Buddy stirred, rubbing his eyes. Mommy? What's that noise? Shh. I hushed him, my voice trembling but urgent. I scooped him up out of the bed. We're playing the quiet game, remember? The one we practiced. I carried him to the narrow walk-in closet at the back of the room. I set him down behind a row of winter coats, pressing a finger to my lips. He looked terrified, but he nodded, pulling his knees to his chest. I stepped out of the closet and pulled the door shut just as the bedroom doorknob rattled. Rattle.
Twist. Push.
The door hit the dresser with a dull thud. It didn't open. Cassandra. A voice called out from the hallway. It was smooth, calm, and terrifyingly familiar. Richard. He hadn't sent a hitman. He had come himself. The arrogance of the man knew no bounds. He wanted to look me in the eye when he finished this. You're making this very difficult, Richard said through the wood. He sounded mildly annoyed, like a man complaining about poor service at a restaurant. I thought Brenda would take care of this cleanly. She was supposed to get you locked up. You were supposed to lose the boy to the system. I would have swooped in, played the loving uncle, and taken the company. But you had to make a scene in court. The police are on their way, Richard. I yelled, gripping the baseball bat with sweaty palms. Vance knows everything. He knows about the money. Richard let out a dark, amused chuckle. Vance knows about a dead woman in an alley. Let me tell you how this plays out, Cassandra. I break this door down. I shoot you. I shoot the boy. I put the gun in your hand. The media has already painted you as a hysterical, unstable woman. The narrative writes itself. The stress of the trial broke you. A tragic murder-suicide. Thump. He kicked the door. The wood splintered near the hinges. The dresser groaned, sliding back an inch. I'm taking back what belongs to my family, Richard growled, his calm facade finally slipping into rage. Thump. The door frame cracked. He was going to get in. If I stayed defensive, we were both dead. The closet wouldn't hide Buddy for long. I had to take the fight to him. I looked around the room frantically. My eyes landed on the lamp on the nightstand. I yanked the cord out of the wall, grabbed the heavy ceramic base, and hurled it at the window. The glass shattered outward with an ear-splitting crash, rain and wind instantly howling into the room. I stepped to the side of the door, pressing my back flat against the wall, raising the bat high over my shoulder.
Crash.
Richard kicked the door a third time with all his weight. The hinges gave way. The door flew inward, pushing the dresser aside, and Richard stumbled into the room. He had a silenced pistol in his hand. He immediately aimed it at the broken window, thinking I had tried to escape down the fire escape. He didn't look beside the door. I swung the bat with every ounce of strength, rage, and terror in my body. The heavy ash wood connected with his gun hand. A sickening crack echoed in the room, followed by Richard's agonizing scream. The pistol flew from his grip, sliding across the floor and under the bed. Before he could recover, I swung again, aiming for his knees. He collapsed, cursing violently, and tried to tackle me. His shoulder hit my stomach, knocking the wind out of me, and we both went down hard. Richard was older, but he was heavy and desperate. He pinned me to the floor, his good hand wrapping around my throat. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his face twisted in a snarl. "You stupid bitch," he spat, his breath smelling of copper and expensive scotch. He squeezed, cutting off my air. "You ruined everything." Dark spots danced in my vision. I clawed at his face, my nails digging into his cheek, but his grip was like iron. My lungs burned. The room started to spin. I blindly slapped the floor with my right hand, searching for anything. My fingers brushed against a jagged shard of glass from the broken window. I gripped it tightly, ignoring the sharp pain as it sliced into my own palm, and drove it directly into Richard's thigh. He roared in pain, his grip on my neck loosening just enough for me to gasp for air. I bucked my hips, throwing his weight off me, and scrambled backward. Red and blue lights suddenly strobed through the pouring rain outside the window, casting erratic, terrifying shadows across the bedroom walls. Sirens wailed, loud and close. Richard looked at the lights, then at his bleeding leg, and finally at me. He realized he was out of time. He lunged toward the bed, reaching underneath for the dropped gun. Step away from the bed. Hands in the air. Now. The bedroom doorway was suddenly filled by the massive frame of Detective Vance, his service weapon drawn and aimed squarely at Richard's chest. Two uniformed officers crowded in behind him. Richard froze, his fingers inches from the pistol. He looked at Vance, the arrogant sneer returning to his face despite the blood pouring down his leg.
Detective.
"Thank God you're here. This woman has lost her mind. She attacked me when I came to check on her." "Save it, Hayes," Vance barked. "We pulled the dashcam footage from a cab parked near the alley. It caught your license plate fleeing the scene of Brenda's murder. You're done." The color completely drained from Richard's face. The lie died in his throat. He slowly raised his hands, defeated. The officers moved in, slamming him roughly against the wall and clicking the handcuffs into place. As they dragged him out of the room, he didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, a broken, pathetic man who had gambled everything and lost. Vance holstered his weapon and knelt beside me. "You okay, Cassandra?" I was breathing heavily, bleeding from my hand, my throat bruised and throbbing. But I wasn't looking at Vance. I pushed past him, stumbled to the closet, and pulled the door open. Buddy was huddled in the corner, his hands over his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. I fell to my knees and pulled him into my chest, wrapping my arms around him, so tightly, I thought I might break him. He buried his face in my neck, crying softly. "I got you, baby," I whispered fiercely, rocking him back and forth. "Mommy's got you. The monsters are gone. They're all gone." 6 months later. The courtroom was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not the tense, suffocating silence of false accusations, but the calm, procedural hum of actual justice. I sat in the front row, watching as the judge banged his gavel. Richard Hayes was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the first-degree murder of Brenda and 20 years for conspiracy, extortion, and attempted murder. He stood at the defense table in a bright orange jumpsuit, looking 10 years older, his hair graying and his posture stooped. He didn't turn to look at me as the bailiffs led him away. Tiffany received 5 years for perjury and tampering with evidence. She had taken a plea deal, testifying against Richard in exchange for a lighter sentence. She cried real tears as they handcuffed her, but I felt no pity. She had been willing to send a child to prison for a payout. Let her rot. The corrupt lawyer who had facilitated the fake DNA report was disbarred and was currently awaiting federal trial for fraud. The empire David had built was finally clean. The board of directors, terrified of the scandal, had cooperated fully. The company assets were secured in Buddy's trust, overseen by an independent financial firm that I vetted personally. I walked out of the courthouse, the same heavy glass doors I had pushed through 6 months ago. This time, the air felt different.
Crisp. Clean.
Detective Vance was leaning against his unmarked cruiser at the curb. He tipped his coffee cup toward me as I approached. "Looks like you won the war, Mrs. Hayes," he said, a rare, genuine smile crossing his tired face. "We won it," I corrected him.
Thank you, Mike.
"For believing me when no one else would." "I just followed the evidence," he shrugged, though the pride in his eyes gave him away. "How's the kid?" "He's good." I smiled, the tension finally leaving my shoulders. "He lost his first tooth yesterday. The tooth fairy had to leave a $5 bill because I didn't have any singles." Vance laughed. "Inflation hits everyone. Take care of yourself, Cassandra." "You too." I walked down the street, blending into the crowd of the city. I didn't have to look over my shoulder anymore. I didn't have to brace myself for the next attack. I took out my phone and dialed the babysitter's number. "Hey," I said when she answered. "I'm on my way home. Can you tell Buddy to put his shoes on? We're going to get ice cream." I hung up, put the phone in my pocket, and for the first time in a very long time, I walked toward the future without fear.